everyone. Welcome to the Simply Trade News Roundup, another week of some interesting stuff going on in the trade industry. And this week is a little extra special because we have a guest who's been on the podcast before, who is from Canada. Woo, we love Canada. Her name is Kim Campbell. Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Lalo, you've definitely done more podcasts with her. This is my first time, bro. Like, there's always a first, right? I'm so excited. And obviously we have Lalo in the studio.
Hi there, everyone. And Andy is MIA because, of course, he just ran into a problem. Probably not as big as what Kim is running into, but he just couldn't make it.
Yeah, so people are probably wondering, well, what's another guest? Yeah, you guys, we're always trying to find things that are new and we're, talk about a little bit different things. And it seems that this is actually one of the biggest issues, which is funny because I had a previous conversation with Lalo, and we were talking on what we could possibly talk about on the podcast that doesn't involve just politics, because it seems like everything is about politics right now, which is because there's an election happening. But there's an even bigger problem. I mean, I don't know if it's that big, but as big as that, but it is big. And it is CARM, which I talked to Lalo before on it, and I was like, yeah, it seems like a great thing. It says that it is now the official system of record used to account for imported commercial goods and pay duties and taxes owed to the Canada Border Services Agency. I'm like, whoa, that's a great tool. It must be doing great. And it seemed like it did on the article I was reading, and we made it a blog. And then I talked to Lalo, and he's like, yeah, I just didn't have a good conversation about it. I think it's a little tricky. So that's why we have Kim here, and we're excited to hear a little bit more about it. I don't know if it's good or bad, but let's hear it from you. How is it going over there?
Well, thank you very much for that. And yes, I've actually spent a couple times with Lalo and Andy just talking about CARM over the last, I feel like, we've been at this since 2018. So, and probably more seriously since 2018 and are on our fourth year of trying to get this in. So, I guess I would say right now it's mixed opinion. Let's just put it that way. We'll start with that. Number one, I can say, as of Monday, October the 21st, we are doing it. So CARM is the official record. And I can tell you that myself and my paid job, I'm definitely moving things through CARM. So I can see that it's going, and there's some benefits there once you get on the portal. But there's a lot of issues that we'll just highlight here today. And unfortunately, most of them were well known to the CBSA officials. We have been testifying in front of our parliamentary committee over the last many months about our concerns around Big Bang and how this system was rolled out. And the sad part about it is I feel like we maybe had a little bit of a forethought or had a premonition, because a lot of the things that we thought we would see, we're actually seeing. So now we're into, okay, here's what it is. And I think there's two things maybe to update people about today. And that is, okay, just some general high level issues about what is problematic. And then just maybe their understanding in terms of, wow, we got a lot of work ahead of ourselves between both CBSA and industry to kind of get this thing back on track. So that would be my first pass in terms of the lay of the land.
And just so everyone knows, and is maybe confused about what Big Bang means, I mean, it's literally Big Bang. Everything went live all at once, and it's not rolled out in phases, right? I think that's
and that was our biggest concern, and we're certainly seeing the benefits of that decision for sure. Maybe not the benefits, but the ramifications of that decision, coupled with the fact that we were actually in a blackout period for 17 days before we went go live. So we have these pockets of transactions. So for the U.S. listeners, this would be your 7501 transactions. They used to be called B3s. Now they're called CADEs. We had not been able to transmit any of them from this period at the beginning of October through the 21st. So, basically CBSA had this thought that once we go Big Bang, somehow magically everyone would be able to transmit day one, and, we'll clean up the backlog and be current by yesterday. So clearly we're not even close to any of that. Kind of our experience was day one. And I, because of my volunteer work, I do have the privilege of people sharing their experiences with me. And what I can report is it probably took us till somewhat in the afternoon before like anyone could kind of get stuff going. There was some people that were able to get some going in the morning. When I say some, like 1-2 files. And that's because part of the thing with CARM, with the Big Bang, it's also we have all new communication pipes. So we're setting up new ways of communicating with customs that we never had to do before. And again, like there's obviously set up on our side, there would be set up on their side. It would be silly to think that it would be perfect in every scenario, and it sure as heck has not been. And so I would say it would take a good 2 days before people were actually getting stuff going in and out. Again, some were successful day one, but it's been a slog. Like they might have sent 3 transactions in and it took them 2.5 hours to get responses. And when I say 2, like these are people that are sending tens of thousands of transactions a day. So again, reasonable to think that would happen. All new systems have that. What's not reasonable is the Big Bang approach. And this is obviously the ramifications. The other thing I can tell you sorry, Lalo, go ahead.
So I was just going to say it's the equivalent of just yanking off the Band-Aid, I guess, right?
We definitely yanked off the Band-Aid. Yeah.
Like really fast.
Yeah. But sometimes usually when you yank off a Band-Aid, you assume that things are healed underneath.
Okay, that's true.
And so this is what we're kind of learning, that all the things that we've been struggling with for years are reoccurring again. So, and so let's just get back and maybe finish up a little bit about the transmission issues. So part of again, we're still working through that. I can tell you there's many service providers that, there's 2 things. There's a software company and then the customs brokers that are using them. Some of those within companies that are actually moving forward, they still are having setup issues. So not everyone is still connected because it's not just a one-to-one connection with a software company. It's obviously profiles around the brokers. And then there's other software companies and no fault of theirs. And we have to be really, really help them. And know this has happened because of the way CBSA rolled this out. They were put in a position that they really couldn't properly solution to be ready. And in addition to that, they were kind of forced into self-certifying. So we know that there are software providers out there that cannot transmit at all right now. So as a result, there's many customs brokers that are also in the position that they're not able to file CADs. This one to me is very troubling and problematic. And we're going to have to really make sure that those people are not left behind and we don't pass judgment on them, because they were just put in such a terrible situation that, it's not surprising to me that this is happening. So the reason I also raise that is part of the big discovery that people would be even seeing today, because we had a statement of account run overnight. This is the other big change that's happened. Importers now are responsible for managing their own statement of accounts and paying their own bills directly to customs. So most of them will probably have seen an SOA this morning, for those that at least are signed on to the portal. Many of them might see nothing because these entries have not been filed. So that's the other discovery people will be having today, potentially, is that we still are having problems getting them through. So don't be surprised if you don't have or you have a statement account with 0, because a lot of service providers are still working to try and get files through.
Quick question. Sure. You know how, this is new to everyone, right? But like, who's being trained in this to navigate your people through using this new portal?
Well, that's such a great question. And that was always another one of our concerns, because we do not believe training, we had enough time for training. The way they kind of push the software providers, and this is the other thing, like for some reason they just decided that, we'll just deal directly with software providers. Okay, that's one approach. They're an important part of the story, and they need to have like their own spaces to figure this out. But the reality of it is they're not the ones doing the work every day. So they were kind of forced to push in to get their software certified, but there was 0 pocket of time for them to put their training manuals together in a common managed way, to figure out all the solution. Because by the way, they couldn't, we've gone live with not even having a lot of things in that solution ready. That they're going to have to figure out after the facts, which is kind of, how you do on the US side, you call them post-summary corrections and appeals. Those pieces are still being worked out because, again, customs wasn't clear or, changed minds halfway. And so those pieces of solutions are still not clear. But the other piece of the story is where we were also fairly sure, because we've heard the customs union testify about this, that their own staff were not properly trained. So we're certainly starting to see these pieces of it now. So even when we're trying to get answers to questions, which we'll talk about in a second, because you really can't talk to anyone. But
Okay,
even at
that's where I was getting.
the border
Yeah.
point, like those officers have not been properly trained, and we feel so bad for them because they've been put into the same position we were put in. And, the fact that they have to now help people fill out forms when they should be making sure that they're looking at the health, safety, and security of our country. This is what they're now, we're understanding they're consumed with at the borders.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds a little crazy. It sounds crazy because it's such an official thing and like it's important and it's not. I mean, you're talking about it so lightly. These are the issues, but these are serious issues, right? If something is not correctly filed or things are not going correctly through, like who's at stake and what can they do? Because I mean, if you weren't probably trained or it felt so fast, then who's to blame?
Well, I feel there'll be lots of opportunity to talk about who's to blame down the road.
Okay.
But and I'm more than happy to join any of those conversations in the appropriate forums, as I have been participating in many of them over the last many months leading up to this. But it's almost at the point though, like here we are. Now what do we do? And how do we dig out of this? And so that's kind of what we're trying to figure out. How can we be constructive together? And that's still a bit of a challenge. So one of the things for sure we're working on as a community is trying to identify issues. So let's just get back to what you just said. Like, who do you call? How do you know? So the pipes in terms of what normally would happen when you implement a project this scale, I feel were probably not set up right out of the gate. There was two things we were instructed to do. If you have an issue, put in a ticket. And so that's going on, but there's definitely intermittent issues with the CARM portal itself. So sometimes it's crashing. Then you get a ticket. You're told you're going to get an answer this day, that day. And then I think Tuesday, sorry, it's a bit of a blur. Tuesday, I just realized as I was talking to people in the community, like everyone's got the same issue, but because we don't have a controlled way of knowing what the already identified issues are, we're kind of spinning our wheels. Like we're all putting in tickets, which is then overwhelming the other side of the fence too. So one of the things that I certainly put forward as a suggestion, I know others in the community did, is could you please just put out a list of identified issues? So at least we know and we're not wasting our time. So they've just published that yesterday. It's a very short list. We know there's much more, but that's a great start. The list is there. It says, here's the issue. Here's where we are. Here's when we expect it to be resolved. So I want to just talk a little bit about like those parts of it. So we talked about the pipes. Pipes are still not completely open and greased to move the things forward. So that's good for people to know. But the second part of it is it's changed fundamentally. Like on the US side, you guys do a 7501 and it's kind of like consolidated. This was the big change that happened here. Now our 7501, we call it CADE, is invoice line specific. So if you got 1,000, lines of commercial invoice data, like $2 one, $6 another, those all have to be in the CADE document. And then there's new rules now applied to each single individual line. So if you got to say anything about, ADD, CVD in the US, we call it SEMA, that has to be by each commodity line. You can't aggregate them anymore. So that means your databases have had to be completely changed. And this is where we're starting to see the problem. So, okay, you might get the pipe open, but now you're into this situation of rejects and you're trying to figure out what they all mean. Some of the rejects are because, okay, you're learning you didn't know because we didn't have good, implementation strategies around training and things like that. So you're triaging those and getting through those. Some of it's just set up because it's all new stuff again. Like you have to now say the importer now has to say this broker is allowed to file this entry. So that we've had a lot of rejects about that, even though we have POAs and all those things in place. So that's added complication. But then the next one, that level of triaging we're getting into is, okay, this system is just, we think is wrong. So for some of the SEMA, a great example I've been given, we in Canada have ADD, CVD on what we call on pasta. Normally it's like 69 cents per kilo. There's something wrong with the calculation. So we have importers that were expecting to pay maybe $200 and the bill is $230,000. So these are things now, and so then you start that triage. You put those to the side, and you say, "I got to put a ticket in." You don't hear from customs. You are hearing from customs. There's a problem, so you don't want to keep pushing those files through until you know it's been fixed. And we got many other examples like that. Like, if there's exemption codes around taxes, those aren't working the way they normally would. And so we got a couple things going on. We got the thing of customs is saying, yes, those are wrong. We have to fix it. But we also have the thing where they say, well, you weren't ever doing it right in the first place. So we have a bit of battle going on about their interpretation of rules that we believe they're not interpreting them correctly. So that's the whole reject bucket pool that we're still trying to work through as well. And again, we're getting mixed. There's varying levels of, we know they've conceded on things. Some they haven't conceded on. Some we know are still big issues, but they're not on the list yet.
It sounds frustrating.
It's
it does.
incredibly frustrating.
but meanwhile, I guess, can we put also things in perspective? So meanwhile, we're talking about the documentation and the back, like the filing and all that, but that doesn't mean that product is physically not crossing over, right?
Correct. Right now, no. Luckily, we fought very hard for that because early February, they were saying if you don't have a portal account, you won't be able to cross the border. You're going to have to pay everything. And so that was one big, massive change that happened. So you're absolutely right. There's really no interruption at this point. With goods crossing the border. I can tell you though, there is some interruption because for clients that haven't set up the portal account, it's almost impossible to get through to get help right now. Let's just put it that way. So they're forced now to have a customs broker. They themselves can do it, but customs brokers typically would play this role is they're having to create paper entries and go to the ports of clearance and get them cleared there and pay the duties and taxes there. So we're starting to see an uptick of that. That one's very concerning. And we just think it's because the help desk is so backed up. And that's where it becomes problematic too from the officer's perspective because they can't even get to the help desk right now. The phone lines are completely jammed up. So the folks that they do get through are saying, just go to the port and the officers can help you, but they can't because they don't have access to the systems and they haven't been trained on it. So we've definitely heard stories where people are in ports for, 3-7 hours trying to figure stuff out. And again, this is only day 5 now. So,
yeah. And there goes my question. Like how, I know, and this is just opinion based clearly because you don't know, but how do you wish it to move forward? Not even how do you think, how do you wish it to move forward or, want it to move forward to get to a place where you're not feeling this frustrated and things are going more smoothly, or do you think it's just gonna have to time is just
that's a great question. I think it's twofold. One is I just think it's a slog. Like whenever you put in a new system where there's massive changes, it's not like it might have been different if we were just going to say we're going to reposition the technology of the format that we're already working on. But that's not what we did here. We're not only doing that, but we completely changed the technology suite and we completely changed the rules of engagement. And by the way, didn't really communicate to the whole community just because of the way they did it. So we're all learning. And again, here's just a great example. Like for some of us that have been fighting the fight, like at the table for 4 years, I'm one of them. There's definitely many out there. We're even struggling. So we can only imagine what's happened to the people that didn't even have the chance to be at the table. So, and again, and this is part of the work that you do as a volunteer. It's like, you really have to be supportive and listen to people because people are really, really struggling right now. And it's only day 5. So, but to get to how can we, and that's always such a great question. And we continue to try and figure that out. How can we be productive? And this is our reality. It's not going back. How do we move forward? So again, I think one of the biggest things is we need CBSA and they just started doing this. Please publish the list. What is what you think is wrong? Are we on the same page? And then please prioritize it. We were told because of the Big Bang and the risk that there was 150 people that were repositioned from the service provider that they've outsourced this to deal with this kind of stuff. So it's a little perplexing to us that, you got 150 extra bodies at the table and we're in this state day 5. So, I don't know if they need to regroup over the weekend and figure out how to triage things quicker and, all that, but we 100% would suggest they need to do that. Again, maybe engage with some few industry people to help you triage it. Right now, there seem to be having like bilateral conversations, one here, one there. It's not a cohesive approach to figuring out things, and we're completely in isolation from each other. The only interaction we're really having is through these lists in this ticket system. So, at some point it would behoove all of us to get together and just say, okay, here's where we are. How do we figure this out and move forward? Again, the other big part of the story, which we did talk about, is those people that still can't connect. So with the ones that are already down that path, that's one thing. But how do we make sure that we bring these other people along? We can't just say, oh, these ones figured it out, you didn't. Too bad for you. So, like that, it's a complicated, unfortunate situation that we definitely find ourselves in.
All right. Well, no, I appreciate that. I mean, this was such a great answer, and I feel like we're pretty early to this.
We are, and I
it
can
barely happened the 21st, right?
Yeah. Like to your point, like every day is a new day. We make a discovery because what I kind of just talked about, the how we've managed going forward. Like not everyone got in for a couple days. Then we kind of said, okay, first what files we're going to try just to see if we can get through. We pick things like no duties, no taxes. So now, and then when you start adding the complication, this is where you're starting to see some of these bigger issues for the ones that are at least lucky enough to be able to transmit. But then again, you have a discovery like we had yesterday. We have temporary imports, which I know our colleagues in the US does as well. These are for like fairs, trade shows, exhibitions. And now we realize we have a really big problem. And I call it the please let's not piss off Taylor Swift problem, is the temporary entries are a massive problem. And why that is customs. And again, this is one we were like, please, we need to talk about this. And they just wouldn't roll up their sleeves and have a conversation. So we're reaping the benefits of those choices. But they have layered on, and Lal, this gets a little bit to what you were saying. The other big fundamental difference is we're now layering in the requirement for bonds at the importer level. So this was another big reprieve we've got for 6 months, is that won't be required day one, with the exception of temporary imports. So that's what we've now discovered. It's like people that are now getting ready to bring Miss Swift's, equipment through, because we have a big 2 weeks here in Toronto coming up in November. We're very excited about that. And guess what? They can't get their entry set up because the bond part is not working. And the temporary, how those entries have to feel, look in terms of the data is not working. So this is one, obviously, we've asked them to please fix right away if you can, because we do not need to be making Miss Swift mad, and we want Toronto to have a great experience. We're very excited about her coming for 2 weeks.
Oh my God. Well, you know what? That's so fun. I mean, not funny. That's not funny at all, actually, on my personal thoughts. But I mean, it's crazy that, again, two worlds kind of collide, because I'm always thinking, I'm in the trade world, and I'm also in the Swift world like crazy. And they always collide, like we've been talking about her a lot, how she moves her things. And here we are, talking about CARM and how this might mess this whole thing up. And so it's so funny that we get to talk about this stuff. Like, first of all, it's great that we get to talk to you on this stuff as and you're shining light on something that just happened, and I feel like no one has talked about it. No one has talked about these issues. I feel like people are so confused, they don't even know who to talk to. So having you on, hopefully people feel a little bit better on the other side. Maybe not better, but maybe a little bit more, at ease, since they're not alone.
Yes, I feel 100%. If nothing else, it gives people that that connection to people to know, okay, it's not just me. I'm confused. Okay, there's a reason you're confused. It's not you. But also in my community, like, you raise such a good point. We talk about it with our friends and family. Like, nobody knows when they go to a show, all the work that's gone on behind the scenes. Yeah. Nobody knows when they eat their food, what's gone on behind the scenes. Like, nobody knows when they go to buy their clothes, what's gone on behind the scenes. So, because we just work really hard to make it seamless. And so, this is, again, a pivotal point for all of us, because our worlds are kind of converging to say, gosh, it's like it's not going to be as seamless as our whole careers work to do. And so it's obviously super stressful and very difficult for us in the community, not only your service providers, but obviously the importers that are empowered to make sure things are correct. and provide trade compliance within their own organizations, because they're kind of in a bind themselves.
Yeah.
It's
So
crazy
lastly, I
because
want to ask you. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say real quick on that. I mean, even though her first show is in about 3 weeks, it's just a day or two before 3 weeks, but her entourage or her fleet, let's call it, because I think I read somewhere she's got a 90 truck fleet. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's probably 90 truck
Oh, yeah.
between 3 or 4 shows, right? I guess they what do they call that? They leapfrog over each other, so one can get to the venue and the next venue. But still, let's say it's half of that or a third of it, 30 trucks.
Well,
Holy
she has a
smokes.
week.
She's going
She
to have
has
to.
a week. She does like this weekend. She's in NOLA, so like New Orleans, and then she has a week off, and then she's in Indianapolis.
Right. No. But what I was
Next
trying to
weekend.
say is, you don't have 3 weeks to figure it out with her. You
No.
got
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No.
maybe a week, 2 weeks
Yeah.
tops, I guess, to figure it out.
Right. And
Oh,
so, like,
yeah.
here's a great example. Like, okay, I'm not sure they're going to be able to fix the system based on what I know, but could you please put in a process and give your officers the delegation of authority to make the right decisions when the stuff starts hitting our border?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That needs. I
Awesome.
mean, I would hope that works. But lastly, I want to ask you. Okay, so if anyone's listening to the show and they're got hit with CARM and they're
I love that.
lost,
I got hit with CARM. That's
lost.
a great way of saying it.
They got hit with CARM. What would you tell them, to do? Who to talk to? Because I feel like, you are someone that knows a little bit more about it because you are hands-on with this, with CARM, I would say. But like someone that, is just a worker and, barely found out or barely like got trained. What would you tell them? Like who to reach out to or like just some light towards them, I
So
guess.
I guess I'd say a few things. It probably depends on how you need to be CARMed. So, in other words, if you're an importer that's moving things across the border, like one of the first things you would have to figure out is like, am I even registered? Because we're still, as much as customs took us into this situation saying they were almost 100% signed up, we knew they weren't, and that's definitely part of the problem. People are now scrambling to sign up. So that would be one thing. I guess generally, though, just maybe a good point to have them start is if they have a service provider, reach out to them. Unfortunately, though, with some things, they have to do it on their own. And that part of it is they have to sign up on the portal. We can only try and support them the best we can. But that is one thing they have to kind of do on their own because of the government, the way they've structured it. So, but their customs broker could certainly, or even a trade consultant or somebody like that could just give them some tips in terms of how to get on there. There is stuff on websites. Even the customs does have a lot of stuff, but again, they've made it so convoluted. Like, I don't even know, like you'd spend hours trying to figure it out and it wouldn't even help you because it's like kind of in the customese kind of language that, that's that live and breathe it every day can figure it out, but others can't. So I would say whatever they can do to find somebody that kind of knows about it, whether it's their service provider, typically a customs broker, that would be maybe the first best start if they don't know anything and need to know something. That's going to be a bit of a challenge too, in all fairness. Like just tell them, everyone needs to have a little bit of grace with each other right now because I can tell you your customs brokers are up to their, in alligators, just trying to figure out their own lives right now on your behalf. So, but yeah, that would probably be the best thing to do that. There, again, I should also though add say customs actually does have some good basic videos on their website. They might be difficult to find, but they are probably maybe what we could do is maybe provide some links.
Yes. I was about to ask you for that.
Okay,
Yeah, I was about to ask you for that. Yeah.
That would be a good place. Maybe just go and take a look at some of those base level videos. They were made years ago, but at least it gives them some insights as to what this thing is.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you. I mean, thank you so much. We're so glad that this, by the way, guys, this happened really fast. We made this whole meeting happen really fast. We had a whole news show, but I am so grateful that you came on because you truly shed light on a lot of things. And while I read this whole article and thought, oh, great, that's great. And over here, everyone's not having a great time. But we're going to keep updated with this, I guess, in a few months or weeks, hopefully things are looking a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But for now, we're glad that we got you on the show and got to talk to our audience, maybe someone who is also experiencing this kind of problem, or working with people that are experiencing with these kind of problems, there's probably also some issues there.
100%.
Yeah. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
my pleasure as always. As I like to say, like the only way we can move forward is if we collaborate and just be
Yes.
honest about the situation and like let's work forward. And so I think these are really important forums. Simply Trade does such great work in our community, getting the word out.
Thank
So
you.
always happy to be here to support the cause, and very much appreciate that you guys do this for all of us.
Thank you.
Well,
And
thank
in a
you
little
for
less
coming
than a
on.
month, I was going to say in a little less than a month, Kim will be on stage with Andy at IE Canada in Winnipeg. No,
Yeah, in Ottawa. Simply Trade is coming to Canada.
Ottawa.
Huh?
Simply Trade is coming to Canada.
Yeah, we
I know
are. So we're gonna be recording a full show on stage with Kim and Andy hosting and taking all the questions from the audience, and hopefully everybody rejoicing and throwing a ticker tape parade because CARM has been resolved. So
let's hope. If nothing else, we do have good cocktail parties. So
exactly.
Well, that sounds great. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Kim.
Bye.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.